Representative Quam, if you'd like to move your bill.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And what was the chair's preference to the GR or?
Yes, the motion would be to make a motion to send this to the general register.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I would move that House File 289 be approved and sent to the general register.
Representative Quam moves that the House File 289 be sent to the general register. To your bill.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And this bill actually started when I attended a faculty union meeting. And they brought up, hey, it's that time of year again. We need members to be on a committee to figure out how we spend the remaining funds we've got in the budget so we don't lose it. And they didn't seem happy about it because, frankly, they wish they had a voice in how some of the money that they received in a budget was spent. Because they're the ones that are interacting with the public, doing the job, and they thought, we might know a little bit more than what the legislature does. And from that was birthed this bill in a slightly different form. Unfortunately, it was when we had a multi-billion-dollar deficit. I believe it was $5 or $6 billion. And the cuts and the constraints, there wasn't much extra money available. The legislature had trimmed, frankly, back then, I think it was in the 30s or low 40s were the budgets. And, $5-6 billion was a big percentage, and there was a lot of hardship. It did get utilized before the sunset kicked in, but there was not a great deal of utilization. But I never gave up the hope that we would be able to empower the actual people doing the job, the frontline people, to have, say if, this is a waste and would, not help the mission, then they ought to be able to flag. It's just like when you empower them and they start thinking and looking, hopefully they'll catch fraud, waste, and abuse. But this is aimed at more of the waste area or inefficiency. When I've talked to other agency personnel in different agencies across the state, they said, instead of giving us this software package or doing this, we really need to replace all these green monitor tubes and the old hardware because we've got problems. So the intent behind here is to give a mechanism to the people that are frontline working and serving our citizens, doing the job, to have their eyes open to see what might be saved. That would give us 50% would go back to the to the state budget. So it'd help with budget reserves and et cetera. The other 50% would go to a fund to be spent on the mission. And that committee that determined what that was spent would be faculty and administration. If it's a college campus, it would be the management and the workers. So it'd be a balance of people to decide, well, we really we've been waiting for 8 years to get this that would help us do the job better. It would give them a mechanism to be able to make those selections, empowering them, so to speak, in their job. Besides saving the money, when I talked to the union members after their meeting, it would make them feel better, and empowered, but when they're listened to and they have a voice, I think workers are more engaged and do, better service. And I think made 2 or 3 of the people smile about the possibilities. Now, after the sunset kicked in and this disappeared, we started having, surpluses and et cetera. I think the timing of this is better because it would have us in the near term before the tails budget kicked in, thinking about the spending and having a conversation and involvement of those people actually doing the work. When it first passed, former Rep. Simon was a co-author, former Rep. Winkler was a co-author, and it passed unanimously in the Senate, and there were only 6 no votes in the House. And it felt good to have, a bipartisan expression of empowering our state workers. And that's the premise. I'm sorry about meandering a little bit, but this is it was the first bill I had drafted, and I've always felt good about it because it involved, the workers. So, Mr. Speaker, or Mr.
Well, I
Chair.
don't need the promotion to speaker. We'll just go with chair. But Chair Quam, I believe you have the A1 amendment that you'd like engrossed into your bill.
Thank you. This is just a technical, and it allows for a more expeditious implementation. Since this already had been implemented, it's a turning on of the switch again.
So Representative Quam moves.
I would so move to add the A1 amendment.
Representative Quam moves for the adoption of the A1. All in favor? Aye. Those opposed? The amendment is adopted and engrossed into your bill. Members, questions on the bill as amended? Representative Jones.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Representative Quam, for bringing this today. I am curious, I appreciate the intent behind this bill as someone who's worked in a local government before, so I understand how that can be valuable. One thing that I noted, though, that it was underutilized. Can you share a little bit more? So given its history, how do you think it might change? Why? If and how there would be more uptake if we were to pass this.
Representative Quam.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Basically, when there's been a huge increase in the budget, we've noticed, through audits and other things, of where there's maybe been an increase of the waste, fraud, and abuse has gone up. I think this timing is, we've got much larger budgets. We've got, we're spending tens of billions of dollars more than when this was going on. We didn't have a $5-6 billion deficit, so we didn't have the constraint. We're coming with a more robust budget and process. So I think there's more opportunity. I think there also, towards the end, was the Odyssey Fund. So they opted for the Odyssey Fund, maybe, instead of this. But I honestly think I was a freshman. This is my first few weeks. There are things, timing-wise, that I might have done differently. And when I saw, the budget and the the opportunities, so to speak. Plus, I've heard from members of DHS, MDH, and others who are speaking up about, we shouldn't be spending the money here, or there's this waste or excess, but we really need to spend it over here. I think this is timely to energize our state employees to be able to feel as if they have a voice and to have their eyes open and be involved instead of going through the motions and maybe things are missed. And I don't think we'll have as much that'll show up in the audit reports if we have the engagement of employees that see that we trust them, we believe in their capabilities, and they are heard.
Representative Jones, further questions? Very well. Anyone else? Oh, Representative Kraft.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
And Representative Freiberg, we'll get to you next.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and Representative Quam. Probably more of a comment than anything. I appreciate what you're trying to do. It's maybe disappointing and would be helpful to have more of an understanding of why it wasn't so used. I will point out, I really appreciate your respect and lifting up of the workers for our state government and in these agencies. They do great work. And I would say that I wish our president had the same respect for employees of the federal government.
Thank you for your comment. Representative Kraft, Representative Freiberg.
Thank you. I appreciate that as well. We've seen this bill before. It's been around for a few years. So it's too bad it wasn't used more initially. As you said, there might have been some budgetary constraints then that aren't quite as prominent right now. So, I mean, just speaking for myself, I'm comfortable voting for this and hopefully keeping it moving forward. And hopefully there are ways we can find ways to increase usage. So just wanted to mention that.
Thank you, Representative Freiberg. I think Representative Bonner is next. Kosnick. Representative Bonner.
Thank you. I know we talked about this bill, I think last session as well. I agree with everybody. I love the concept of this bill. I love the idea of it. And you know that I'm a very team-focused person, so I love that aspect. The one challenge that I've always struggled with on this bill is two things. One, I think sometimes employees may not always, if they are not the person managing the budget, they may not always understand the decisions that are made or why we make a decision or not make a decision, which I struggle with a little bit as often the person who actually had to do the budget, that sometimes my engineers and folks didn't always understand, that the higher ups were requiring that I do a certain thing, or that we have to put in additional hours because we have a specific deadline that we need to meet, and or they maybe just didn't like the deadline. That could be true too. So I think that's really challenging. But the other thing that I've struggled with on this is I like the flexibility of having the input, but at the same time, I do wonder, if a manager tries very hard or tries to incentivize their team, let's say, to save money. We set out a budget to hit all of what we think we're going to spend. But again, it's our best guess. We don't know, right? So it's not unlikely that we could end up having some money left over. Maybe we didn't get to hire the FTE we wanted, or we decided that we couldn't order the new printer that we wanted, whatever. But I think one of the things that, which by the way is a good thing if we don't spend all the money that we were allocated, just to be clear. But the other thing is, if we have that leftover money, or we try to incentivize our folks to, let's say, find ways to find efficiencies or save money, and we're rewarded with this pool at the end. And I know you mentioned it too with the Odyssey Fund, but I think that says to me, if we were to do that, maybe we are doing that intentionally to try and reserve money so that we, at the end of the year, if there are things that we normally wouldn't be able to fit in our budget, that, you know, the things that get kicked down the road, right? Because we just don't have the money. Like, we really, really need a new printer, and we're trying to patch this thing up 20 times. It needs to be replaced, but we don't have the money right now. Well, at the end, if we have that money left over, that might be something where the team could decide, you know what, we really need to do something about this printer. Can we upgrade the printer? And I guess I struggle a little bit with this idea that perhaps they may be incentivizing their folks to save money on purpose and to try and save that. And it feels like this might not incentivize them to do that. Does that make sense?
Representative
And maybe
Quam.
you can speak to that.
Well, you know,
Representative Quam.
first of all, Mr. Chair, I think by having a stronger conversation, so to speak, you're helping, and you're going to have a better organization, because management will understand, oh, this is what they think we need to do, or even if it doesn't happen, by being listened to, I think there's more satisfaction to the worker. The other thing is, if I am a commissioner or director of a group, and we have, in the last budget, saved X amount of money, and it's only going to be a third of what we need to get this software or hardware upgrade. When I come to the committee and I say, we already have, you know, a third of this money, just give us the rest of it, and we can, and that'll save us time and money, increase productivity, but we'll be able to respond to our citizens in a much better fashion. We won't have the crashes, we won't have the delays, we'll be responsive to our citizens. I think the legislature is going to take that and give it more probability of happening than if, yeah, we want this thing. Because not only is there some money, there's the thought from the management and the actual workers of the importance. And the presence of that conversation has an impact upon us legislators, because we like to hear from more than the figureheads sitting up at the table. And that included input and action to get that money set up for there is good. And I would probably, in private, say to the legislators, you know, and you already had the same amount of money put back in your general fund, so really it's only a third of the money, because we saved 2/3. And that's the kind of conversation I think may have an impact to help us justify giving the actual things they need to that group.
Representative Bonner, anything further?
Just one last quick follow-up. I really appreciate that. And again, I love the idea of that team focus and specifically having goals, right? If you can find ways to save money. My only last question is, I love the idea of we have a third. Could we find a way to get the other 2/3 to meet the need? Statutorily, are there any barriers in the way that would prevent them from keeping that third, or that would not allow them to make that type of investment, as you're suggesting, if they don't have all of the funds?
Representative Quam.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair. The structure of having it in a special account that is to be used towards the mission of that entity is some assistance. The other is when you've got management and rank and file both in the conversation and the decision, I think there's more credibility in that action. If there's some additional language to get rid of a loophole, I'm here for the intent. I am not like, oh, this is my wonderful language. No, I'm for the intent. And that's why we have these conversations, is to, all the viewpoints looking around might see something that I missed, and we can make it better.
Representative Koznick.
Mr. Chair, I appreciate the bill. I just wanted to more broadly address, it's great when members can make comments for or against the bill and speak in committee and not ask a question necessarily, and that's okay. Representative Kraft, it's unproductive and unprofessional to attack the administration that's not even got to do with the bill. I hope we can do better because we're going to need to do better and pass.
Mr. Chair, we cannot impugn motives.
Madam Representative Cleavorn, we're,
Is to speak to the concerns and the merits of the bill. And I hope that in the future and going forward, we refrain from attacking the administration, whether it's Governor Walz or our President Trump.
Representative Clardy.
Yeah, thank you. I just wanted to speak directly to the bill. Could you clarify how this interacts with the Odyssey account?
Representative Quam.
My understanding is that it doesn't interact with the Odyssey. It's like if there are these options around, depending on the department, they pick this option or that option. You know, again, I put a sunset in this so that it would go away if there were problems, or it would allow us to tweak and improve it. The timing of when it went away, other things were going on, and it was just recently that I looked at, you know, pushing it again because 14 years on the Legislative Audit Commission, I've seen process issues and other things. And the underlying thing is how can we do things better? And when I look at empowering the person closest to the activity, I think that's a long step towards doing things better.
And Representative Quam, I've asked nonpartisan staff to be our phone-a-friend. Ms. Roberts is available if you need the answer, but there are two separate funds. They don't necessarily interact directly. And one does not trump the other, and one does not backfill the other. There are two separate funds. So if you need further clarification, Ms. Roberts can give you that. If not, we can also talk offline, but there are two separate accounts. Further questions? Representative Cleavorn to wrap.
Thank you very much. And Chair Quam, I appreciate the fact that you are diligent about this bill, and I admire the fact that you are elevating the voices of our state employees and recognize the fact that they do often have great ideas. And they do often provide those good ideas, and those savings are often incorporated in the work that they do every day in our state. So I appreciate that. The piece that I'm concerned about with this bill is that when you think about the process that the funds have to go through, right, much similar to the Odyssey, right? So an employee recommends to their management MMB would then have to approve the project out of the Savvy account, and then it would go to the LAC for ultimate approval, right? Oftentimes when the LAC things come out, it's right after session, and a lot of legislators aren't even participating or looking at those reports, as I have discovered in past years when I have been like the only nerdy one asking questions about what the recommendations are. So my concern is that if the LAC does not respond properly and appropriately and quickly, it's an automatic denial. So I would ask you that if this bill moves out of committee, that you, and this is the problem that I have with it going straight to the general register. There are, I think, improvements that could be made for a different way for that process to occur, and I would be happy to work with you. We've never worked on this before, but it has come before the committee every session that I've been on this committee. So I would I'm not ready to vote for the bill in its current form, but I would be happy to work with you to see if we can find a better way to improve it. And I'm going to ask my team to just vote their conscience, however they want to vote. I'm not going to ask them to vote up or down, but I would prefer that it not go to the general register at this time so that you and I could work on it and maybe make it a better process. Thank you.
Representative Quam, closing words.
Thank you for that. And I strive to have, good bills, but I realize that with input from others, we can make, better bills. The LAC is much more familiar with the processes in the different departments. Plus, there are meetings year-round. And there's the involvement on the LAC of members of both chambers and both major parties. So there's a bit of a balance. And I have a little bit of experience, so I trust that as being a good place. If there are amendments that any of you members come to me with and we sit down, I am all for doing a better job. The reason why we had out of 201, you didn't have to use both hands to count the people that voted against it, is because we saw both sides of the money. So half the money to general register, half to, and that way it was middle ground for the, we argue about this side, that side, but it was nice to come together and with something that, was a middle, between the two arguments. So I am going to continue to be available to make things better, and especially if there are any, state workers that are looking at this, let me know. And I'm open, but I don't see another committee that this is really going to, fit into.
Thank you, Representative Quam. And yes, this is going to the general register. This is the Committee of Jurisdiction. So Chair Quam renews his motion that House File 289 as amended be referred to the general register. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Your bill is on the way. Thank you, Chair Quam.